Many people say, and they're correct, that Israel is a major sign to tell us where we are in the end of the age. But Israel is just one of many signs. Jesus also says there'll be wars and rumors of wars. He also says that kingdom will rise against kingdom. That's a very interesting phrase in Greek because it describes political philosophies, warring political groups, trying to squash warring political groups. It really describes unethical behavior in the political realm. Does anybody think we might be seeing that today on a level like we've never seen before? Jesus gives explicit signs. But when he begins his list, he begins with a sign that is something most of us don't really hear about as the primary sign to alert us that we've entered the end of the age. Jesus says in verse 4, take heed. The word take heed is a Greek word blepeto, which means look, listen. The words are so strong that it was almost like Jesus was reaching out to grab hold of the collar of the disciples. He is shaking them to get their attention. He says, take heed, blepete, listen to me, perk up, hear what I'm about to tell you. And then he immediately says, take heed that no man what? Deceive you. Everybody say deceive. Well, in this particular verse, Jesus doesn't even use the normal word for deception. This is the Greek word planao. The word planao is a word that is used multiple times by Jesus and by the Apostle Paul, so we know exactly what this word planao means. And it was a word that was used in the intertestamental period between the Old Testament and the New Testament by the rabbis, so the usage of this word deceive is very well established. This word deceive, the Greek word planao, was specifically used to describe a person, a nation, a group of nations, or society as a whole that once walked on a very solid, well-known moral path. But now for some reason they have deviated from the path that is familiar to them. The path they have been upon is time-tested. It is trustworthy. They know it's safe to walk upon that path. But now this word deceive, the Greek word planeo, describes a person, a nation, nations, or society as a whole making the decision that we will depart from the route we have walked upon and we're going to go another direction. And this particular word deceive describes a person, a nation, nations, or society that has now veered from a path of moral uprightness, and they are literally teetering on the edge of a dangerous and treacherous cliff. And in fact, the same word was used to describe an animal that so completely lost its way that it was unable to find its way back home. So now the disciples said, Lord, tell us exactly, concretely, explicitly, what is the sign? What is the thing that we should be aware of more than anything else that will alert us that we have entered the very end of the age? And Jesus says, I'm going to tell you first, above all, up front, take heed, listen to me careful. When deception enters the human race, you will know that you're no longer passing toward the end, but you have passed the barrier, and now you have passed over into the very, very end of the age. Interesting that this word deceive is used by the Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verse 11, where the King James translators properly translated it as the word delusion. It's talking about delusionary times. Delusionary times. It is the same word which is used by the Apostle Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1, when he says that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits. That word seducing is the same Greek word, spirits of delusion. So when you compare the writings of Jesus with the writings of Paul, you find at the very end of the age, when we've crossed that barrier into the very end of the age, we will enter into a time when delusionary spirits have been released into society. And people will begin to believe things that are not supported with correlating facts. People will believe things that are even diametrically opposed to science. People will listen to their feelings more than they will listen to facts. is deluding people's minds with false thoughts, causing them to question everything about their own identity, even the way in which they are made. So that boys don't know if they're boys, girls don't know if they're girls. People are going through operations to try to alter themselves to make them into something else. Transsexual operations. Now I have to tell you, I'm just going to be honest. May I be honest with you? We live in Russia, and in Russia, these things do not take place. In fact, our president, whom I know the West doesn't like, he has made a very strong statement. He has drawn the line. And you know what he recently said? I listened to the interview. He gave an interview with the Financial Times of London. And the Financial Times of London said, President Putin, what are you going to do with the LGBTQ movement in Russia? Would you like to know how he answered? He said, first of all, we're going to be compassionate. He said, people have a choice to do what they want to do, to believe what they want to believe. We're going to be compassionate. People have their rights. He said, however, as a nation, we have made a decision. This is what he said. We are studying the United States. And we're watching how they are departing from biblical truth. And we as a nation have determined we're not going to go that way. We are returning to the foundation of the Bible. That is what our president said. I heard him say it. And so the reason I'm telling you that is because when Denise and I come to the United States, which is twice a year, and I know that you live in the United States, so you have a grace to live here. But it is really quite shocking to us. I'm sure it's shocking to you. But we've been gone 30 years. We've been gone 30 years. This is not the same country that we left 30 years ago. It is not the same country. There has been a departure from what it used to be. The spirits of delusion are working in society. We disembarked from our plane in Atlanta. We walked down the bridge to get onto the next aircraft. And as we walked down the bridge to get onto the next plane, the bridge was filled with photos of all kinds of families, this family and this family and this family and this family, and blended right into all the images that all the passengers walked by is a man with his shoulder laying over on the shoulder of another man holding hands. I said, Denise, the spirit of iniquity is at work. It is bombarding the minds of the general population. This is mental modification. This is exactly what Jesus prophesied. It is a worldwide deluge of delusion and deception, trying to lead people off track, to believe that which does not even correspond with science. Now, when you come to Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul describes amazingly what happens to a society or a nation that departs from God. So let's go there. Romans chapter 1. And I want you to see what the Apostle Paul said. Romans chapter 1 is one of the most brilliant things written in the New Testament. And in Romans chapter 1, we're going to begin in verse 21. Paul, writing under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, says, because that when they knew God, this word knew is a Greek word ginosko, not the word epignosko. Epignosko would describe intimate knowledge. That would be a word you would use to describe people who have an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. That's not the word that's used here. This is the word ginosko. It describes a God-fearing nation, a nation or a people that has a general respect for God. Even if they don't know God personally, still they have a respect for that which is sacred or that which is holy. And now Paul says, because that when they knew God, when they had a general acquaintance of God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Notice the result of turning away from God. It doesn't make you intellectually bright. This verse says they became vain in their imaginations. The word vain is the Greek word matios. The word matios describes something that is wasted, something that is tainted, something that is ruined. The word imaginations is the Greek word dialogismos, which is the very word for the human faculty to reason, reasonings, intellectual conclusions. And now Paul says, when a God-fearing nation, a nation who once had an understanding of God, when they begin to turn from him, ceasing to glorify him as God, and lose their thankfulness. By the way, when it says neither were thankful, it carries the idea of people who are no longer grateful for what they have, but now they have a feeling of entitlement, like they deserve everything they have. It is a loss of thankfulness. Paul says they become wasted, Matthias, they become tainted, their mind becomes affected, their mind literally becomes ruined. And he says specifically their imaginations, their intellect, their reasoning, their faculty of thinking, it literally becomes ruined, wasted, and their foolish heart is darkened. The word heart is the Greek word cardia. It's where we get the word cardiac arrest or a cardiac ward. Cardia describes the human heart. So you have to think for a moment, what does the human heart do? The human heart pumps, and it pumps, and it pumps, and it pumps. Your heart is pumping right now. We're all grateful that our hearts are pumping. And what do hearts pump? The heart pumps blood. How much of your body has blood? Every part of your body has blood. The heart is pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping blood throughout the entire system of your body. But now Paul uses this same idea to tell us when a society turns from God, they cease to glorify him as God, they cease to be thankful, they become entitled. Their mind is affected. Well, of course, the Bible tells us clearly that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And when you turn from wisdom, from God, even if you're intellectually bright, you begin to believe nonsense. You begin to believe nonsense. And Paul says even worse than that, not only is the mind affected, dialogismos, their faculties of thinking, but their foolish heart is darkened. And here he paints a picture of society and the heart of society. But rather than the heart of society pumping blood, the heart of society begins pumping darkness and pumping darkness and pumping darkness and pumping darkness until finally that darkness has infiltrated every part of society. This is the destiny of a nation who ceases to glorify God and refuses to be thankful.